Welcome, everyone, to the Thursday edition of Fair Territory. I'm Ken Rosenthal, flying solo today. No Alana Rizzo, no Scott Braun. You're stuck with me. But the good news is we've got plenty to discuss, starting with news that just broke this morning out of San Diego. The Padres are exploring a strategic sale of the club, which means the owners are going to try to sell the team. To explain this briefly, this was kind of inevitable once Peter Seidler passed away late in 2023. And you might recall about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, Seidler's widow sued two of his brothers for control of the team. And now we hear today that they are indeed going to be sold, and presumably that would help resolve the legal dispute, which is ongoing. What does this mean? Well, when Peter Seidler passed, we all knew that there was never going to be another owner like him. He transformed baseball in San Diego with the way he invested in the team. The city and the people in San Diego, that area, responded in great numbers. The attendance has been amazing. They've had an issue with their TV deal. Bill Shaken of the LA Times also noted this morning cash flow might be an issue. So there are some issues there, problems, some long-term contracts that eventually could haunt them. But it's going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Now, it's not fait accompli. This will happen. If you recall, in recent years, the LA Angels were for sale, the Minnesota Twins were for sale, the Washington Nationals were for sale, and eventually were pulled off the market. But this is a first step toward selling the San Diego Padres, and it is something obviously we'll all be paying close attention to in the days, weeks, and perhaps even years ahead. All right, it's award season, and I want to get into the AL MVP and NL MVP, both of which will be announced tonight. But first, I want to reveal my Cy Young ballot for the National League Cy Young Award. That was the only category in which I voted this season, and I'll explain how I voted because it's kind of interesting, not for who I voted for first. That was obvious. Paul Skenes, unanimous winner, as well he should have been with his sub-2 ERA. Brilliant season for the Pittsburgh Pirates. The real issue for me, and I'll show you my ballot now, was Logan Webb. Now, when I vote for Cy Young, I generally am someone who prefers innings, who prefers volume. I weigh that very heavily. But you see my ballot there. Logan Webb, the National League leader in innings pitched this season, is nowhere on there, and he had a good season. It wasn't like he was someone who just threw a lot of innings with a 5 ERA. No, not like that at all. So why did I go against what I normally do? Why was I inconsistent here, as voters sometimes are with these things? I just felt that even though Webb led the league in strikeouts, he also led the league in hits allowed. Now, this is partly a reflection of him pitching 207 innings, but I felt that at the bottom of the ballot, Freddie Peralta and Nick Pivetta, both those guys, their performances, albeit in fewer innings, 25 fewer innings approximately in Pivetta's case, about 30 fewer in Peralta's case, I just felt that they outperformed Webb when they were on the mound. Now, when you pitch more innings, it's harder to sustain excellence the way you might if you're pitching 170, 180 innings like Pivetta and Peralta were. But I look at opponents' OPS, and this is just one measure, and Pivetta was third in opponents' OPS in the league behind Yamamoto and Skenes. And then Christopher Sanchez was fourth, Peralta fifth. Again, one measure. Now, Logan Webb, the problem with excluding him, this is the thing I struggled with. He led the league, or he was one of the leaders, I believe, in strikeout to walk ratio. He was third. And he also was the victim, somewhat, it seems, of poor luck. Very high batting average on balls in play, opponent's batting average on balls in play. But in the end, we can look at expected numbers. We can look at what should have happened. I just felt, though, Webb was a guy who was going to do better with WAR because that honors volume. I just felt that Pivetta and Peralta were more deserving. I didn't think the top three were any question at all. Skenes, Sanchez, and Yamamoto. So that's how I voted. I'm not sure it's right. That's the way I went about it. All right, now, AL MVP tonight. I've said this before, and I'll say it again here. I'm kind of grateful that I didn't have a vote for this award this year. And yeah, it's a little bit of a cop-out when I say that, because to me, it's always an honor to vote for any award, and we all take it pretty seriously, as you can hear, and I'm sure see when you see writers analyze what they did. But with the AL MVP, It's like apples and oranges with Judge and Raleigh. And to me, there is no wrong answer. I'll say it again. No wrong answer. I expect Judge is going to win. I don't know by how much. It's just my hunch. I don't have any inside information on that. But the reason I expect Judge to win is that for all Raleigh accomplished, and he had a historic season, record for a switch hitter, home runs, record for a catcher, home runs. For all that and all that he did as a catcher defensively, all that can't be measured intangibly, 200 points in OPS, which is what the gap was almost in the end, almost 200 points, Judge over Raleigh. That's going to be difficult for Raleigh to overcome with voters. Now, you see the OPS gap there. You also see the difference in WAR. I don't take WAR seriously when it comes to catchers. I don't believe that WAR, which is an estimate to begin with, fully accounts for everything a catcher can do. What a catcher does intangibly is lead a pitching staff, work with all pitchers that come into play for the Seattle Mariners, in Raleigh's case this year. And as Justin Hollander, their GM, the Mariners GM, pointed out, there is an emotional toll with catching that is different than just hitting or even playing the field and hitting. And the emotional toll is, well, if you go 0 for 4 on a given night, okay, you kind of think about your at-bats. If you go 0 for 4 and you've caught 145 pitches that night and maybe 3 of them went awry and you're wondering about that and how that could have been different, that's a mental taxation that the average position player does not experience. That said, Aaron Judge is Aaron Judge. He is an amazing performer, as is Raleigh. And I just don't know how exactly this is going to turn out. I know voters are split on this. I know that. I know Raleigh's going to get a certain number of first place votes, and he should. But as I've said before, I'd almost like to see it end in a tie, which would be hard to do the way the voting is tabulated. Now, we can still appreciate Raleigh's year, of course, even if Judge is the ultimate winner tonight. And Dan Shaughnessy of the Boston Globe, a writer who has been honored by the Hall of Fame with the BBWAA Excellence Award, Career Excellence Award, he had a column in which he explained Ted Williams, Triple Crown in 1942 and 1947, finished second both times, I believe to Joe DiMaggio in both. One year, he had 406. That was in 1941. He also came in second to Joe DiMaggio. Stan Musial, 4 second-place finishes. And you see what Ted did right there. Those were pretty good years in which he didn't win an MVP. And catching is a tough position to win from. Only 2 catchers have won since 1999. Joe Mauer in 2009, Buster Posey in 2012. So it's going to be an uphill battle for Raleigh. It was always going to be an uphill battle. But we can all remember what was an amazing season by an amazing player. It will never be forgotten. And if he doesn't win an MVP award, well, that's only one measure of a player and a player's greatness. And I don't know that it will take anything away from Cal Raleigh. Obviously, you want to win it. You want that on your name forever. But if he doesn't win it, he's still got, I don't know, the record for most home runs by a switch hitter, the record for most home runs by a catcher, and the memories he created for fans all season long. National League MVP, we know what's going to happen. It's going to be Ohtani unanimously again. This will be his 4th MVP award in 5 seasons. He has had an incredible career. This year, of course, he did it differently than last year. Last year, hey, you remember he was not able to pitch, and he stole all those bases and did it that way, 50-50. This year, he's pitching again, and while the offensive numbers maybe weren't quite as great, he just had that all-around amazing season. All right, finally, before we go into the Grillin Ken segment of the show, there's a lot we've written at The Athletic over the last couple of days about the closer market. The closer market is quite robust because there are quite a number of good closers available. Edwin Diaz, Devin Williams. You go right down the list. There's a bunch of others too. I'm thinking of Ryan Helsley, Luke Weaver. You can go right down the line. Racel Iglesias, Pete Fairbanks. Obviously, some of these guys are more highly regarded than others, but it's a big list. And you see today in our notes column, the one I wrote with Will Salmon and Katie Wu, there's a note about the Red Sox maybe finding or signing a closer, even though they have Chapman, someone who would pitch the 8th inning with Chapman there and then perhaps supplant him ultimately as the closer once Chapman is not Chapman anymore. And perhaps that won't happen anytime soon. The Orioles looking for a closer. The Blue Jays looking for a closer. The Mets have to figure out whether it's Diaz or someone else. The Dodgers, too, looking for a late-inning reliever. They've been one of the teams linked to Devin Williams. Will Salmon of The Athletic had a terrific story on Williams yesterday and just how his season statistically was a bit misleading. You have to dig deeper and look into some of the things that were going on to really understand what happened with Williams. And I forgot to mention with the closers, Robert Suarez, another fine closer, available in free agency. There also might be some traded. So that's going to be a market that's going to be really interesting to watch. It's going to be, I would think, quite lucrative for the pitchers at the top. Edwin Diaz is seeking a deal much like the one he signed with the Mets before opting out of this one. 5 years, $102 million. Will he get that? I don't know, but these guys, for the most part, they're going to get paid. All right. With that, we close out the first segment. We will be right back after this with Grillin Ken.
That's Pop Quiz. What has 35 grams of protein, 6 grams of fiber, 27 essential vitamins and minerals, comes in excellent flavors like, of course, chocolate, vanilla, but chocolate peanut butter, my favorite. No added sugar, gluten-free, under $5 per meal, and is ready to drink.
Go out the house, get yourself a Huel. Look at you. You even have one right there. Ready to smack that, John? Chocolate peanut butter, chocolate, and vanilla. Deliciosos.
Also, there is a new Daily Greens ready to drink. 42 vitamins, minerals, and superfoods. Only 25 calories on that one. 4 grams of fiber. There's flavors like blueberry, apple, peach. Huel makes healthy eating simple. They also just launched into Target stores nationwide. Try both products today with 15% off your purchase for new customers with the code FOUL at huel.com/FOUL. Use that code FOUL and fill out the post-checkout survey to help support FT.
All right, here we go. Time now for Grillin Ken, the part of the show where I answer your questions. Let's not waste any time. Let's get right to them. First question comes from Tyler Mack Smith, who asked, do you see the Braves restarting Byron Buxton trade talks? I know Anthopoulos said he is prioritizing a shortstop and a starter, but he's proven what he says and what he actually does are two different things. Tyler, you are a smart person because Alex Anthopoulos, the way he operates, going back to his days in Toronto, he is someone who kind of is stealth. And often when you see names attached to the Braves, those aren't the names that he is looking at. The managerial search was just the latest example of that. So, Buxton, really interesting situation in Minnesota. If you've been reading Dan Hayes in The Athletic, and even I wrote about this a little bit this week as well, the Twins are in a funny position. Their president of baseball operations, Derek Falvey, clearly wants to build the team up again and not continue tearing down, not continue what they started at the deadline. That would mean keeping Joe Ryan, keeping Pablo Lopez, and yes, keeping Byron Buxton. Dan wrote a story yesterday saying that if they do tear down, then Buxton, who has been adamant about wanting to stay in Minnesota, might have a change of heart because obviously you're not going to want to play for a team completely rebuilding, a team that's going to be far away from contention. Now, Buxton is from Georgia. We all know that. And he would be someone I would think almost every team would be interested in. The Braves have a center fielder, Michael Harris II, and a darn good one. They do have other priorities. So I do not see them necessarily getting involved in the Buxton sweepstakes. If indeed they become Buxton sweepstakes, we're actually a long way from that. What happens now is we have to see what the Twins' budget is going to be. They don't even know yet. Owners have not given the word yet. And AJ Przinsky asked me, how can owners not know the budgets yet? And I asked that question last night here at the GM meetings and was told that with the TV money, the local TV money, a lot of times it comes in late and they're kind of assessing as they go along. So we have to see what the Twins' direction is going to be, and we'll have to see if indeed it leads to a point where they're even interested or entertaining the idea of trading Byron Buxton. All right, let's go next question. This one is from Justin Long, who asked, do you factor in pitcher-friendly ballparks versus hitter-friendly ballparks into your voting? Yes. Good question. And in the case of Pivetta, he's pitching in a pitcher-friendly ballpark. Webb, too, is a pitcher-friendly ballpark. Yamamoto, Dodger Stadium's kind of neutral. Skenes, PNC is more or less neutral, I believe. But I do consider kind of all these things. That less than others because it doesn't often play a major role. Most of these pitchers, they're at the top of their game. They're good on the road as well as home, no matter where they're pitching. So it's not necessarily a front and center thing, but sure, in certain cases, you're going to look at that and factor that in as well. All right, next question. Let's see what we got here. Let's see if we got anything here. All right, here we go. D. Alvarez, who asks, would a package of Sheehan, Stone, Rushing, and other prospects get a trade done for Skenes to the Dodgers? Nice try. For one thing, Paul Skenes is not getting traded. For another thing, if he was getting traded at this point, it would take a heck of a lot more than Sheehan, Stone, and Rushing. But one point here that I want to make with regard to the Dodgers, and I did not realize this until our beat writer, Fabian Ardaya, reminded me of it. Next year, their starting pitching depth is going to be incredible. Why? Gavin Stone is coming back from surgery. River Ryan is coming back from surgery. And they've got all the guys that, of course, played such prominent roles for them this year as well. So they're going to be in really good position. Emmett Sheehan will be a year into his career at that point and should be ready to contribute even more. They'll probably have more starters than they know what to do with. But as for Skenes, no, he's not getting traded yet. Do I expect ultimately he will? Perhaps, but he was pretty adamant on his conference call last night about wanting to win in Pittsburgh and kind of showing the 29 other fan bases that this is what the Pirates and he want to do. All right, next question. This one comes from Armandus Amazing. He says, Ken, have you heard about any relievers on the trade market? We've seen one reliever traded, Andrew Kittredge, from the Cubs back to the Orioles. Pete Fairbanks was available until the Rays declined his $11 million option, obviously did not get traded. I am certain that there are relievers available. I haven't heard any specific names about what teams might consider. There are guys, though, but free agency is probably the first choice for many teams with regard to relievers because there are a number of them out there, and it's easier to sign a free agent than to trade prospects for a reliever, especially when relievers are so volatile. All right, next question. Let's see what we have. This one comes from, I can't even pronounce this, Zuzi LOD. Ken, with the CBA and looming salary cap being pushed by MLB, the MLB, no, it's not the MLB, it's MLB. I'm curious, are the big spending teams pushing back against the salary cap because they draw a lot more because of the big stars? You're asking a good question here, and here's why it's a good question. Because often with CBA talks, it's not just players versus owners. It's owners versus owners. Large market owners have different interests than small market owners. Now, there is a world where I am sure big market owners would maybe welcome a salary cap because it would limit what they could spend. They wouldn't have to go out and outspend everyone else. They'd be limited in what they could do, and that would give them as well as the small market teams cost certainty. But a lot will depend on the TV deals as well and how baseball ultimately figures that out and whether they distribute the revenue from that kind of in an even manner. I don't know how it's going to play out. So the question is, will there be a dispute between big market and small market teams about a cap? I can see a world where Rob Manfred convinces everyone that a cap is in their best interests, but as for a competitive advantage right now, yes, the Dodgers, the Yankees, the Mets, Phillies, they have a huge competitive advantage because they can spend without restriction or without much restriction. There is a luxury tax threshold in there as much as they want. Okay, what else do we have? Well, we don't have anything. What we have coming up are the Dudes and Dorks of the Week. It'll just be solo this week. Dude and Dork of the Week coming up right after this.
BetMGM account holders, today, how about an Any Sport Parlay Boost token? You can score a bigger payout if your wager with that token hits. Tokens can be used on parlays and on same-game parlays. Gambling problem or concern? There's help. Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Hey, an easy way to support the show and wear super comfy clothing is by heading to foulterritoryshop.com. Yes, foulterritoryshop.com is loaded with Foul Territory gear and lots of Fair Territory gear. If you want to give some love to Ken and Alana, go check out a hat, a t-shirt, and a lot more. Coffee mug in the morning? foulterritoryshop.com is the spot.
Dude. All right, dude of the week. Now, this is an interesting question this week, and I want to harken back to the manager of the year voting. A lot of Blue Jays fans were quite upset when Steven Vogt of the Cleveland Guardians beat out John Schneider of the Toronto Blue Jays. John Schneider, certainly a candidate for dude of the week. Great season. I personally felt Steven Vogt getting to the playoffs and winning the AL Central with that team, going 19-4 down the stretch without Clase and Ortiz and all that happened to them. I personally thought he should have been manager of the year simply because of that. He didn't have the team John Schneider did. But I digress. My dude of the week is another manager who was snubbed in the manager of the year voting, and that is Dave Roberts. Now, keep in mind, the managers of the year are selected based strictly on regular season performance. The ballots have to be in before the playoffs start. But Dave Roberts this year beat all three National League Manager of the Year finalists, Terry Francona, Pat Murphy, and Rob Thompson, in the playoffs. He beat all three of them. So that's kind of dude-worthy, I would think. And certainly what Roberts has done with the Dodgers, winning 3 World Series, all those division titles, everything that he's accomplished in the regular season. Yes, he's had great teams. We all know that. But you can screw up a bad team. You can just look to New York to see how that happened in the Mets situation and Yankees. Not the manager's fault necessarily, but the point is you don't have a guarantee of winning, even with a big money, star-laden team. Dave Roberts has won. He's headed to the Hall of Fame. And for that, he is my dude of the week. All right, let's break and go to the next segment we have here. That would be Dork of the Week. All right, Dork of the Week. The obvious choices would be the 2 cats who were indicted by the federal government in an indictment that was unsealed Sunday by prosecutors in Brooklyn, Emmanuel Clase and Luis Ortiz. Easy to name them Dorks of the Week, but innocent until proven guilty. Their lawyers insist they're innocent, even though the indictment reads pretty specifically about what they did. I'm not going there with those 2 guys. I'm going to go to the world of music for my Dork of the Week, the world of rap music. And I'm going to give it to Drake. Drake, of course, who's taken one hit after another in his beef with Kendrick Lamar. He's kind of lost that thing time and time again. Well, here it is already. Again, I should say. Drake ticking off the Los Angeles Dodgers. He's a Blue Jay fan. And you see what he tweeted there or put on his Instagram, and the Dodgers took exception. The Dodgers, I mean, this is kind of silly, but they drew motivation from it. Drake, maybe you need to stay in your lane. Here it is. Exclusive from TMZ. Drake going after Shohei Ohtani during the World Series actually backfired hard. Miguel Rojas tells TMZ Sports the locker room definitely took notice of the rapper taking shots at their superstar teammate, and they didn't like it one bit. Drake, man, you're on the wrong side again, dude. You're the Dork of the Week. All right. So let's get to one more question before we end the show today, at least the television side. We've got a Dodgers question. Here goes. For the Dodgers to trade for Quan, who would you most likely see getting sent? I'm sorry, I don't see the rest of the question. First of all, I don't know that the Dodgers are going to trade for Quan. And they were interested at the deadline. And remember, it didn't happen. The Guardians generally are considered a difficult team to deal with. And it's not that Chris Antonetti and Mike Chernoff, their heads of baseball operations, are difficult human beings. It's just that they set the bar a certain level. And if you meet that level, you can make a trade. And if you don't, there's no trade. And that's the way they operate. Now, I would imagine the Dodgers, in need of outfield help, will again explore the Quan situation. But I just don't know that it's going to lead to anything. The Guardians are desperate for offense. They've got Jose Ramirez, they've got Quan, and they've got a bunch of guys that there's hope. There's some younger players coming too that could be impact players for them. But if they trade Quan, unless they're getting something really good back, it's difficult to imagine them competing at the level that they have in the last couple of years, which is at an extremely high level. So I don't expect the Quan trade to happen. Clearly, if the Dodgers did it, they've got a bunch of outfield prospects. Not really all that close to the majors, some of them, but they could start the deal with some of those names, include some pitching, and maybe then the Guardians would be tempted. I'm not sure. Quan is a great fit for anyone. Low chase rate, ball and play all the time, really good player. So, again, I don't see it happening, but it's the offseason, and I always say this, offseason, deadline, whenever, things will happen that make our heads spin. And I expect things that happen this offseason to make our heads spin again. So with that, I want to thank everyone for watching on the television side of our program. We have a little bit more left for the YouTube family, and we'll be right back after this. All right, we're back, and I have one more thing I want to discuss before we close out the show for the week, before I leave Las Vegas, where the GM meetings have been held this week. Not too sorry to be leaving Las Vegas, by the way. It's an interesting place. It's not the greatest place for a GM meeting. There are a lot of distractions for the writers, for the executives. No, seriously, everybody's kind of locked in. They're not messing around. Maybe a little bit at the gaming tables and the slot machines, but that's about it. But the topic I want to discuss is really an interesting one because it's one of the most fascinating things that's happened to baseball this season and maybe in the last couple of years. And that is the return of Paul DePodesta to the sport after 10 years in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns. He is taking over the Colorado Rockies, and Andy McCullough today has an amazing story about how things have changed in the last 10 years. Andy talked to executives from around the game here at the GM meetings, and he said, or he wrote basically what he heard, which is that so much has changed. Some of the things he mentioned were that players get to the big leagues much sooner, even those coming out of high school. Obviously, technology has changed. TrackMan, you see it right there in the headline of the story. Launch angle was not a thing 10 years ago. And just in general, there is so much that is different. Now, Paul DePodesta is one of the smartest people you will ever meet. And he's worked, obviously, in baseball for quite some time. Did before he joined the Browns. He was with the Oakland A's, guy that was famous for what he was portrayed as in Moneyball. Then he went to the Los Angeles Dodgers, became their general manager at 31 under the McCourts. It was a mess, partly due to the McCourts, and Paul maybe was not ready for the job. And then with the Mets and the Padres as well. This is someone who is, again, extremely intelligent. He is also inheriting a team that really has nowhere to go but up after a historically bad 2025 season. So the consensus is that he'll get up to speed, and he'll get up to speed pretty quickly. But so much has changed in 10 years in this sport. And I am sure for DePodesta, there's going to be a little bit of culture shock. Now, whether he can turn this around, how quickly he can turn this around, it remains to be seen. The Rockies are the Rubik's Cube of baseball. It's difficult to find the solution. No one really has long term. They've had some seasons in which they made the playoffs. 2007, of course, they made it to the World Series. They've had some seasons in which they were pretty competitive. But pitching in particular at altitude is something that no one has figured out yet. And it's going to be difficult for DePodesta to do it, but he's essentially starting from scratch. He has a team where he can build in any direction that he wants to build in. And with that, I expect that it's going to be a really interesting ride. I don't know if he will succeed, but he will bring new ideas to the table. He will certainly have his own perspectives. And the Rockies, for so long, so irrelevant, a team that barely is worth paying attention to, now are a team that you're going to look at and say, okay, what's going on with those guys? All right. I want to thank everyone for watching, for listening, both on YouTube and on our television outlets. Foul Territory is next. Heidi Watney is hosting. She has the pleasure of being on with AJ Przinsky and Eric Kratz. Jason Tingler, Jason LaConfora, and Chris Cotillo will be the guests. Fair Territory returns Monday at 10 a.m. Have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.